The moment Maya agreed to the bet, she told herself it would be easy. After all, she had spent 4 years perfecting the art of emotional detachment, building walls so high that nothing could reach her anymore. But as she stood in that crowded coffee shop, watching Daniel across the room with his gentle smile and kind eyes, she felt the first crack in those walls. A tiny fissure that would eventually shatter everything she thought she knew about herself. It started on a Friday night when Maya's friends had gathered at their usual spot, a dimly lit bar near campus where the music was loud enough to drown out uncomfortable thoughts. They were celebrating the end of finals, and the alcohol was flowing freely. That's when her best friend, Chelsea, made the proposition that would change everything. She pointed to a guy sitting alone in the corner, buried in a book despite the chaos around him. Daniel Hayes, the quiet engineering student everyone knew but nobody really knew. Chelsea's challenge was simple: pretend to be his girlfriend for 2 weeks, make him fall for her, then break it off. The prize? $500 and the satisfaction of proving that even the nicest guys could be played. Maya should have said no. She should have recognized the cruelty in the game, should have seen how it would hurt an innocent person. But she was broke, bitter from her own past heartbreak, and convinced that nice guys were just better actors than the rest. Her ex had worn the mask of perfection before ripping her heart out, and she had learned to see kindness as a weakness, vulnerability as stupidity. So she agreed, shaking Chelsea's hand with a confidence she would later regret. The plan was methodical. Maya did her research, learning that Daniel volunteered at an animal shelter every Saturday, that he tutored kids in math for free, that he was close with his younger sister who had special needs. She orchestrated their first meeting at the campus library, deliberately sitting at his usual table with a confused expression and an engineering textbook she had borrowed. When he offered to help, his voice soft and genuinely concerned, she felt nothing. Or so she told herself. She watched him explain complex equations with patience, noticed how his eyes lit up when she finally understood, observed the way he tucked his hair behind his ear when he was thinking. He was handsome in an understated way, with a smile that seemed to come from somewhere deep and true. Their second encounter was at the animal shelter. Maya had fabricated a story about wanting to volunteer, and Daniel's face had brightened with such pure joy that something uncomfortable twisted in her chest. She spent 3 hours that Saturday helping him bathe dogs, clean kennels, and bottle feed abandoned kittens. He told her about each animal's story with the kind of empathy that seemed almost painful, as if he felt every bit of their suffering personally. When a scarred pit bull named Chance finally trusted her enough to take a treat from her hand, Daniel looked at her with such warmth and approval that Maya had to look away. She told herself the flutter in her stomach was just hunger. If you believe in kindness and second chances, in stories that remind us of our own humanity, please take a moment to like this video, leave a comment about a time someone showed you unexpected compassion, share this with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to our channel. Your support means the world, and it helps us bring more of these powerful stories to life. By the end of the first week, Daniel asked her to be his girlfriend, and Maya said yes with a practiced smile that felt increasingly hollow. She told herself she was succeeding, that the plan was working perfectly. But she didn't account for the way he remembered small details, how she took her coffee, that she loved old bookstores, that she got anxious in crowds. She didn't expect him to show up at her door with soup when she mentioned feeling sick, or to spend an entire evening helping her study for an exam in a subject he knew nothing about just so she wouldn't be alone. She didn't anticipate the way his presence would become the best part of her day, or how his laugh would start to sound like home. Daniel introduced her to his sister Emma, a bright 12-year-old with Down syndrome, who loved Disney movies and drew the most beautiful pictures Maya had ever seen. Emma hugged her the moment they met, with the kind of unguarded affection that only children and the pure of heart can give. Daniel watched them together with such tender happiness that Maya felt physically sick with guilt. She excused herself to the bathroom and stared at her reflection, barely recognizing the girl looking back at her. What was she doing? Who had she become? But she was in too deep now, and Chelsea kept texting her updates, reminding her of the money, pushing her to see it through. The breaking point came on a Tuesday evening. Daniel had planned something special, a picnic under the stars at a secluded spot on campus that overlooked the city lights. He had packed her favorite foods, brought a telescope to show her constellations, and wrapped her in his jacket when the night grew cold. As they lay on the blanket, staring up at the infinite universe, he told her about his dreams. He wanted to design prosthetics for children in developing countries, to use his engineering skills to change lives. He spoke about his father, who had died when he was young, and how it had taught him that time was precious, that love should never be taken for granted. Then he turned to her, his face serious and vulnerable in the moonlight, and told her that meeting her felt like finding something he hadn't known he was missing. He said she made him want to be braver, to open up in ways he had always been too scared to try. He said he thought he might be falling in love with her. Maya's world stopped. The words she had been playing, pretend with, suddenly became real, heavy with meaning and consequence. This beautiful, genuine person was offering her his heart, and she was holding it in hands that had been poised to crush it from the start. The weight of her deception crashed over her like a wave, drowning her in shame so profound she couldn't breathe. She managed to whisper that she needed time, that she wasn't ready to say those words back, and Daniel simply smiled and told her he could wait. His patience, his understanding, his complete trust, it was more than she could bear. She spent that night crying into her pillow, wrestling with the truth that had been growing inside her despite her best efforts to kill it. She loved him. She loved Daniel with a fierce, terrifying intensity that made her previous relationship look like a pale imitation. She loved his kindness, his strength, his unwavering belief in goodness. She loved the way he saw the world and the way he had started to make her see it too. But how could she tell him? How could she explain that their entire relationship was built on a lie, that she had pursued him as a game, that she had bet on his heart like it was a poker chip? The confession came 2 days later. Maya couldn't keep living the lie, couldn't keep accepting his love under false pretenses. She met him at the coffee shop where she had first seen him, and with tears streaming down her face, she told him everything. She watched his expression change from confusion to disbelief, to hurt so raw it felt like she was watching him physically break. He didn't yell or curse or make a scene. He simply stood up, looked at her with eyes that held more disappointment than anger, and asked her one question. Had any of it been real? Maya grabbed his hand, holding on even when he tried to pull away. She told him that yes, somewhere along the way, it had become the most real thing in her life. She told him that she loved him, that she was sorry, that she understood if he could never forgive her, but she needed him to know that he had changed her. He had shown her what genuine kindness looked like, had reminded her that there was still goodness in the world, had made her want to be better than the cynical, broken person she had become. She told him about her ex, about the walls she had built, about how he had somehow found a way through them despite her best efforts to keep him out. She wasn't asking for another chance. She knew she didn't deserve one. She just needed him to know the truth. Daniel left without another word, and Maya felt like she was dying. She returned the money to Chelsea and cut ties with the friends who had encouraged such cruelty. She threw herself into becoming the kind of person Daniel had made her want to be, volunteering at the shelter, even though every moment there reminded her of him, helping Emma with her art projects because the little girl's disappointed face had haunted her dreams, trying to atone for a mistake that felt unforgivable. But if this story has touched your heart, if you've ever made a mistake that changed you, if you believe in the power of redemption and growth, please like this video and leave a comment. Share your own story of transformation in the comments below. We read every single one. 3 weeks passed in agonizing silence. Then one Saturday morning, Maya looked up from bathing a golden retriever at the shelter to find Daniel standing in the doorway, watching her. Her heart stopped. He walked over slowly, his expression unreadable, and for a long moment they just stared at each other. Then he spoke, his voice quiet but steady. He told her that what she had done was wrong, that it had hurt him more than she could know, that he had spent weeks trying to reconcile the girl who had played him with the girl who had cried when Chance finally got adopted, who had spent hours drawing with Emma, who had looked at him like he hung the moon. He said he didn't know if he could trust her again, but he knew that people made mistakes, that they grew and changed, that love meant choosing to believe in someone's potential to be better. He asked if she wanted to start over, not to pick up where they left off, but to begin again, honestly this time, with no lies between them. Maya nodded, unable to speak through her tears. They spent that day at the shelter, working side by side in comfortable silence, rebuilding something that had been broken into something new, something earned rather than stolen. It wasn't easy. Trust, once fractured, takes time to heal, but they were both willing to do the work. Months later, as they walked hand in hand through that same spot under the stars where Daniel had first confessed his feelings, Maya understood that love wasn't about perfect beginnings. It was about choosing each other, despite the flaws, about growing together, about being brave enough to be vulnerable even after being hurt. She had pretended to love him for a bit, but in losing herself in that pretense, she had found the truest version of herself she had ever known. And in his forgiveness, she had learned that sometimes the greatest love stories begin with the worst mistakes, transformed by the courage to change and the grace to forgive. And if this story moved you, please comment second chances below before you go. Daniel kissed her forehead and whispered that he loved her, and this time, when she said it back, every word was true. They had found their way through darkness into light, and the journey had made them both stronger, kinder, and infinitely more grateful for the love they had nearly lost but fought hard enough to keep.